right, welcome everyone to the January 4th meeting of the Planning Board. Our chair, David Weber, couldn't be here tonight, so I'll be filling in for him. First item on our agenda is approval of minutes from our last meeting on December 7th. Any comments or questions about the minutes?
Make a motion to accept.
Is there a second?
A second.
Further discussion? All in favor of approval of the minutes of December 7th? Opposed? That's a 6-0 vote. Thank you. All right, next item on our agenda is a continuation of the public hearing from the December 7th meeting for the Montessori School on 27 Pomeroy Lane.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year.
New Year.
On behalf of the client, we'd like to request that the hearing tonight be continued till the next hearing. We received comments back from Jason Skeels on December 23rd. Responded to those comments with several, comments of our own, and hopefully you all have a copy of it. And I think Jason needs to at least meet again with us to vet some of these issues, because many of them seem to be reoccurring issues that, we're not sure we can solve as part of this project. We've done what we've said we would do in meetings with him in private, and we're still getting these comments. So in light of that, and in an interest of saving everybody some time and effort, we request to continue until the next hearing.
So that would be on Wednesday, January 18th?
Sure.
Would work for you?
Yep.
Okay. And Chris, do we think it would be possible to have Mr. Skeels at that meeting?
I will ask him to come to.
Okay, that would be helpful, I think. And we do appreciate your patience and thoroughness in working through these issues and trying to make sure that his concerns are addressed and the board's concerns are addressed.
Sure. Yep.
So, Chris, do we have anything on our schedule for that evening yet?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
This hearing at 7:05.
Okay. So I will move that we continue the public hearing until 7:05 p.m. on Wednesday, January 18th.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's a 6-0 vote.
Great.
Thank you, and we will see you in 2 weeks. All right. The next item on our agenda is under old business. We've received a bunch of materials from Mr. Eddings on the issue of bird-friendly windows and building practices via email over the last couple weeks. Mr. Eddings is here tonight, stashed away in the closet, conducting a conversation with IT staff to try to get his computer on the screen, which actually it looks like he has successfully done just in the nick of time here. Is that true? Are you up and running? Yep. So Mr. Eddings asked if he could come in and talk to us about the materials that he's presented to us, and so I've given him 10 minutes to quickly run through his materials and to help educate us about avian safety.
And he said, no, just do this, that, and the other thing. And as you can see, this, that, and the other thing didn't work. But now we've got it up and running, so thanks very much. Maybe you can reduce the size of that so you can get the whole thing on there? Okay, great, thanks. First of all, thanks very much for the opportunity to address you again. Regarding bird-friendly buildings in Amherst, and specifically the Boltwood Place development that's now under construction in downtown Amherst. So following my December 19th to the developer of Boltwood Place, which I copied to you and to Mr. Tucker, Mr. Tucker and Dan Clem, whom I believe is the world authority on the causes and the consequences and the prevention of bird collisions with windows, have exchanged emails on the topics. And I'm pleased to see that communication taking place and to have been copied on a few of those emails. My impression is that the primary finding of Dr. Clem's 3.5 decades of research on those subjects is that wherever birds and windows occur together, whether those windows are transparent or translucent or reflective, bird collisions with windows occur. I believe that has been the point that Dr. Clem has most sought to emphasize in his email exchanges with Mr. Tucker. So we accept that premise, that wherever birds and windows occur, birds collide with windows. The relevant question becomes, what is the risk that birds that occur in the vicinity of Boltwood Place, what is the risk to the birds that occur in the vicinity of Boltwood Place, or more specifically, what species of birds known to occur there are known to collide with windows? We can also approach the problem more generally and ask, what is the risk of bird collisions with windows throughout Amherst? They're good questions. They're ones that Mr. Tucker has raised in his correspondence with Dr. Clem and with me. They seem to be most useful, particularly to town planners, and given that the windows of Boltwood Place are presently already being installed. I'll note, however, that even after windows have been installed in a building, modifications to them, along with building management strategies involving internal and external lighting and vegetation, can reduce the risk of collision that those windows pose to birds in flight. I briefly discussed these window modifications and building management strategies in my letter to you and the developer of Boltwood Place and Mr. Tucker last month, so I won't repeat them now. And by the way, as an aside, it's believed, in part from the data collected by Dr. Clem, that about 50% of bird collisions with windows result in mortalities. So back to the question about the risk that the glass walls of Boltwood Place may present to the birds in their vicinity. This publication is a good place to start. In the back, obviously it's titled Birds and the Habitats in Amherst, Massachusetts. It's published by the Kestrel Trust. In the back is a checklist of the 255 bird species that occur in Amherst, a number, the authors point out, that surpasses many of the country's best-known birding areas. In my letter to you, I compared that list with this one, which I took from a website maintained by Dr. Clem. It's a list of the 200 bird species documented to have collided with sheet glass or sheet plastic in the United States. It's not on there, John. In the United States, and found that of those 271 bird species known to collide with windows in the United States, of those 271, 173 occur in Amherst. Of those 173 species known to collide with windows and that in the United States and that occur in Amherst, my personal estimate is that at least half of them occur in the vicinity of Boltwood Place. And this gets to the heart of Mr. Tucker's concerns that he was raising with Dr. Clem and myself. What specifically is the risk to birds in Amherst that occur in the vicinity of Boltwood Place?
Mr. Eddings, can I interrupt you for a moment?
I just wanted to note, and I'm not sure Mr. Eddings knows this, the correspondence between Dr. Clem and Mr. Tucker has not been shared with the board. So
That's fine.
I've been referencing it, and I just wanted them to know that for clarification.
Thank you.
Sure. I don't think there's a need for, well, we can deal with that at another time if you'd like to see it.
So if I may, Mr. Eddings, my preference would be, and because you've got a limited amount of time here, our interest from the board's perspective is more in the area of going forward, what things that we should be paying attention to as projects come before us to prevent the types of issues that you're talking about. Boltwood Place is a project that we've already permitted long ago. It's obviously been constructed and is nearing completion of construction, and we have no oversight over that property at all now. That's out of our hands. And so what we're interested in is what sorts of best practices you could recommend to us that future projects coming before us that we take into consideration. But we cannot go out to Boltwood Place and require them to do anything different. I understand your concern about the project, but you'll need to follow up with building management there if you have issues about that particular property or any other property, because we as the board have no control over their operations now. We've already permitted the project and it's been constructed. So it would be more useful for us if you could give us advice going forward to what we do with future projects.
Thanks, Jonathan. You mentioned that during the brief presentation I made last month. And if I may continue at about 5 more minutes, I'll address that point specifically.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you don't run out of time before you have a chance to help us with those issues.
Okay, thank you. So again, of those 173 species known to collide with windows and that occur in Amherst, my estimate is at least half of them occur in the vicinity of Boltwood Place. I just want to discuss a small number of them, just to make this less abstract for you, particularly for those of you that may not have great familiarity with the avifauna of Amherst. The sharp-shinned hawk. It's a state-listed species as a species of special concern. That means it's one notch below a species threatened with extinction. I see a handful of them perched in or now outside my window, and can we move on to the next slide?
The next document or within this
no.
one?
Can you go back to the, you may be in the wrong, can you go back again?
Back to here?
No, to the, okay, down, no, back, Jonathan?
Yep.
To the previous slide? Number 3, the second one down, number 3, yeah. Okay, this is from the Amherst website. Does this pointer work? I don't know how to get this to work. Chris, do you know how this works?
It might not be
Maybe
working.
you'll also be out of
Walk up to it.
batteries.
That's
This is
fine.
where I live, and this is where I often see sharp-shinned hawks, a species of special concern. And so I use this is from the town's website.
Push that button.
Very good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I live here on South Prospect Street. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. It's just the first left past the Jones Library is heading down the hill, right there. Here's a proposed development, and you can use a nice little feature on the town's website and measure the distance. It's according to that tool, I live 1,450 feet from Boltwood Place. That's a little more than a quarter of a mile. I see sharp-shinned hawks all the time outside my window. And that is of the 42, there's a publication, can you go to the next slide? There's a publication, down one, there it is. This one here, Human-Related Threats to Urban Raptors. Okay, it was published in 2004, I believe. That publication lists the sharp-shinned hawk of the 42 species that occur in urban areas in the United States. There are 52 species of raptors in Canada and the U.S. 42 of them occur in urban areas of the United States. The sharp-shinned hawk occurs the sharp-shinned hawk, among many others, occurs in Amherst. That is the species at the very top of that list. Of the 42 species that occur in urban areas of raptors, birds of prey that occur in urban areas of the United States, the sharp-shinned hawk, a threatened species of special concern in Amherst, is the most likely to collide with windows. It's a 2009 paper, by the way. Okay, the peregrine falcon. We all know the peregrine falcon. Okay, that's a species that's listed as endangered with extinction by the Commonwealth, and that nests on the University of Massachusetts campus. As the crow flies, I'd guess it's a mile, maybe from Boltwood Place. The author writes in that paper, in the paper I just cited, that collisions with windows is the leading cause of mortality for sharp-shinned hawks and peregrine falcons that occur in urban areas. Okay, can we go to the next line?
This one?
Yeah. I took this picture this morning outside my window. Again, I live 1,450 feet from Boatwood Place. That's a red-tailed hawk. It's a common hawk in Amherst, I'm sure you know. Okay? It's also on the list of raptors that collide with windows. Again, I took that picture this morning in a tree outside my window. I know many of you know Eva Schiffer, or knew Eva Schiffer. She lived immediately behind me. That tree reaches out over my yard. The trunk is in my yard, and it reaches out over her yard. Just to give an idea of where that tree is located. That's in her former backyard. Chimney swifts, okay? Until it was demolished during the renovation of the Amherst Cinema building in 2006, one could observe more than 100 chimney swifts flying into the chimney at the rear of that building at dusk on late summer evenings. I did many nights. Chimney swifts also roost in the chimney of the building in which I lived. Chimney swifts are declining throughout their range because of the loss of roosting and nesting habitats, but Amherst still supports a summer population. Last summer, chimney swifts are those birds that occur way high up and they have beautiful voices. They chatter all day long when they're here in Amherst, which is about 5 months of the year. The rest of the year, they concentrate down in the Peruvian Amazon, the high Amazon, the Peru and Ecuador. Last summer, while I was sitting at my desk, one flew into an open window of my apartment, okay, and collided with the window that was closed immediately in front of me at my desk, okay? And I went under my desk and thought, whoa, I know that's a bird, but what bird could it be? And I was shocked that it was a chimney swift because the other birds that occur during the daytime, way, way up in the sky, they're just little specks, okay? So I went down and grabbed it, took it out onto my porch and released it, and it flew off. Whether it survived or not, I don't know. But at least it wasn't killed instantly. Woodpeckers. 12 species are known to collide with windows in the United States and Canada. I regularly observe 4 of them foraging in dead limbs of the trees outside my apartment: the downy, the hairy, the red-bellied, and the northern flicker. A 5th, the pileated woodpecker, occurs less frequently in my yard. With the extinction of the ivy-billed woodpecker, the pileated is now the largest woodpecker in North America. Last month, a pair foraged in an old elm outside my window. It was the first time I'd seen more than one at any one time. For me, it was a very exciting moment. All these species, including the pileated, are on the list of birds known to collide with windows in North America. Can we go to the next slide? This is my last species. Cedar waxwings, okay? They are among North America's most beautiful birds, some believe, and I do. Certainly it's among the most dignified looking. I shot this photo of a flock of about 40 foraging in front of the fruit of a tree in front of the Amherst Chamber of Commerce. You can see that's People's Bank down there. That's a few hundred feet from Boatwood Place. Okay, next slide. See, same tree, same day. Cedar waxwings migrates across international borders to our north and south, and it's protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And it occurs halfway from my house, from where I live, to Boatwood Place, which is to say a couple hundred feet from Boatwood Place, and it's known to collide with windows. Okay? The American goldfinch, black-capped chickadee, Carolina
Mr.
wren.
Eddings?
What's that?
What should we be looking for as design characteristics in a building to help? I think we take your point that there are many species that are at risk. So what should we be doing to help mitigate that risk?
Okay, Jonathan, my attempt in communicating with you, well, for one, I'll just skip to the next paragraph where I address that. I'd like to propose that the town work collectively with the building's owner to, if these windows are going to go in, and they're going in now, and they're huge, okay, and they're, you know, I studied this question as a graduate student, bird collisions with windows, okay. So all the windows there have all the problems, all sorts of red flashes are going off in my mind when I look at that window. So, but it's going to go forward, okay? And in my letter to you, which I know was forwarded to you, right? I proposed a bunch of solutions, or I didn't propose them, I just listed what's known to work, okay? Since then, something that wasn't included in that correspondence with you was something Dr. Clem and I have discussed in a phone conversation since, and that's a film that can be placed on these windows. Ideally, this film is sort of built into the windows when they're being manufactured. It's too late for that now. So the film can be exposed externally on these windows, and it's just the film reflects UV light, a small spectrum of the UV light spectrum, okay? That spectrum is not visible to humans, but it is to birds, okay? So it's known to be effective in preventing avian collisions with windows because then they can see the windows, but the humans can't see that. So that's something that, I'm pleased to see you all looking through that document. On the next to the last page, I think are proposed solutions to the problem. So if the problem is going to be addressed after the windows have gone in, there are a bunch of things that can be done. They're discussed in there. There are management strategies of lighting. Lighting is critical, how the building is lighted both externally and internally. And also vegetation, external vegetation around the building. And as shown on the website, there'll be problems with the vegetation as they're positioned right now. The trees that he shows will be ideal for maximizing bird collisions with windows. So it's internal and external lighting that can still be adapted, and it's internal and external vegetation. I mean, vegetation that's visible to a bird from the outside in a building, it promotes collisions with those windows. But what I'd also like to suggest is that perhaps the town craft a letter to the developer saying, you know, this, although I already have, you received that copy, saying, you know, this has come before us and we're concerned about it, and we'd like to sit down and talk with you about it. Dr. Clem said he'd be happy to participate in those conversations, in those discussions. But what I'd also like to propose is that the town work collaboratively with the building's owner to monitor bird window collisions that are occurring there. The presence of the area's colleges and the university also presents an opportunity to conduct a controlled experiment, some of which have been conducted elsewhere, of the effectiveness of any strategies adopted to reduce the rate of those collisions. UMass, for example, has a Department of Environmental Conservation, which has a graduate concentration in wildlife, fish, and conservation biology, which offers a course in urban ecology. It also has a Department of Biology, which has a course in ornithology, offers a course in ornithology. So what I'm suggesting is perhaps a work-study student can be hired by the developer, by the town, I don't know, I'll leave you to work out that detail should this interest you, can be hired, a work-study student can be hired, and they work for next to nothing, I know I was one, to design and conduct an investigation under the supervision of a faculty member. An investigation similar to the one I proposed was conducted at Swarthmore College's Science Building when it opened in 2004. I've talked with the guy who designed that study, an engineer at Swarthmore College, and I'm sure he'd be delighted to discuss with you how a similar study can be designed, or professor at UMass, how a similar study can be designed for the Boatwood Place building. I'm almost done. Okay. I hope my contacts with you have been useful to you in understanding the considerable risk that sheet glass and sheet plastic can present to birds in flight, and addressing those risks in Amherst, presently and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Eddings? Chris?
I just wanted to point out that there was a colored document that I sent you via email. So you have this document on your computers if you wish to read it. If you want me to make copies of it for you, I'd be happy to do so. But it does provide information about bird-friendly building design.
If I may comment on that? In my correspondence with you, and thankfully you got an electronic copy of it, it was a 5-page document that I sent to you. It had a handful of attachments to it, and it also had several links in it. One of those links is to that document. There were 4, it was under the title, What Other Communities Are Doing, okay? New York City has a management plan for bird-friendly windows. The city of Toronto has a management plan. The city of San Francisco has a management plan. You have those management plans in your inbox because you have link. They're all online, and all you have to do is click on the link, and that document and 3 others are available to you about what municipalities in the United States, how they're addressing this problem.
Any questions for Mr. Eddings? Rob?
So the way we would normally act on this in future projects would be through site plan review, in which we would ask a developer to conform to a certain standard. Like we often, or almost always, I would say, require downcast lighting, for instance. What exactly can we ask a developer who does the project? What can we ask them? Are you doing this? Can you do this? I want to know what this is. The words that I can use to talk to the developer to make sure that I'm getting bird-safe windows. And the second question that I have is, what is there a size of building, a percentage of glass proposed, a height that we should be concerned about? Is it all buildings? Is it a building of a certain size that this is applying to?
I'll start with this general comment. I really admire the planning board because I know, I once served on a committee that was unfortunately just dissolved by the select board. And I know how hugely time-consuming all of this is for you, especially your committee, man. I look at your agendas, I look at your minutes, and I think, wow, and these guys don't get paid, these guys and women. So I guess I should say thank you for all that work. And now I've just put a lot on your plate because there's not, when I studied this problem in 2000, there wasn't much known. My job was a lot easier. Okay, so, but now there is. Now there is a lot known about both the causes of bird collisions with windows and the consequences of those collisions, and the prevention, how to prevent them. There's a fair bit that's known, and I tried to just, of the many documents available, I tried to just pick those that I thought were the most relevant to Amherst and were the most current. And also, I've been corresponding and discussing this problem with specific to Amherst with Dan Clem, who's a world authority on the subject, and he's at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania. He's very approachable. I'm not going to sit in front of you and pretend that I'm an authority on this subject because I'm not, and I didn't mean to give you that impression. I do know something about it, and enough to be very concerned about it, and enough to know that Boltwood Place is going to be a problem. So to answer your question, I'd say these things. First of all, downcast lighting is already required by the town of Amherst. So I don't know why. You step out in front of the town hall and you see there's not downcast lighting. There's lighting that radiates into the heavens. Okay, I don't know why the town doesn't even enforce their own regulation of its own lighting, let alone the violations. You can walk through hundreds of homes around Amherst and see that. Why do we have that regulation? It's an important one. Many people prefer that would like to see it enforced. It's not.
Mr. Eddings.
Okay. Secondly, LEED, the developer of this building, if you go to his website, boltwoodplace.com, you see there's a banner across the top of the home page, LEED certified. It's got a silver certification, okay, which is wonderful, okay? When he got that certification, whether it was last year...
Mr. Eddings, if I may.
I'm going to directly answer Rob's question. When he got that certification, there was no bird-friendly criteria for LEED certified buildings. Now there is. Okay, it was added this year, or 2011. So I suggest to you that your problem is easily answered by going to their website. What is it, American Builders Association? They maintain that website, and look for yourself to see what their criteria are for bird-friendly buildings. I'm sure many of them adjust windows, but there are other criteria as well.
Thank you. That's helpful. All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Did you have your hand up?
Well, I have a comment.
Sure, go ahead.
But I don't think we're the right body for this. I think it's really important. It's a really important issue. I think that, as has been pointed out, the only tool we really have is site plan review and in some cases design review. But really, to me, this is a building code issue, which is that your group should be lobbying the BBRS, which basically is in charge of the building code for Massachusetts. That's where I think your energies would be much better. What's that called? It stands for building, BBRS, just Google that. So that's what I would recommend. Yeah, because I'm actually feel quite uncomfortable of adding, sort of, things into, even in those cases where we have site plan review or, design review, because, there's many, many issues regarding designs of building of which bird friendliness is part, but without, some sort of vetting of what all the other issues are, I'd be very reluctant to, single that out.
Sure, I certainly wouldn't advocate for singling it out either, because there are many concerns. But it's helpful for us to be
Yeah,
aware
yeah,
of it
yeah.
as an issue, and I think it's safe to say that it's not been on our radar, so to speak,
No, it
in
has-
previous reviews. So
Yeah.
it's useful information to have. Thank you very much, Mr. Eddings, for your
Thank you.
presentation and your information.
Would it be all right if I close the window?
Sure. It alternates between really hot and
it's
really
getting too
cold.
cold.
Thanks for your help.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, the problem was a loose cable in the back.
Thanks, Chris. All right, do we have anything else to discuss under old business?
Old business, you're asking me.
Yes, sorry. And I was giving you a chance to get back to your desk. Thanks for your AV help.
Do not think so, no.
All right, under new business, we have discussion about fall town meeting. I'm not sure if that represents a new agenda item or continuation of previous discussion. Ms. Brestra.
That was something that you continued over from your last meeting because you didn't really have enough time to talk about it. But Jonathan Tucker wasn't here last time, and he's not here right now, and I think that you all felt that it would be useful to have Jonathan around to discuss that. You may want to put that off till another time.
Sure. I see nodding heads down the table, so we will do that. All right, Water Supply Protection Committee, Planning Board Representative. We need to name or consider naming a representative to the Water Supply Protection Committee. Is this, do you know if this is a member or a liaison?
Don't know.
Chris.
This was recently brought to our attention by the town engineer, and the only information I have about it is the information that he provided in this document. Voting members may include representatives from the Agricultural Commission, Conservation Commission, Planning Board,
You can
and,
move it over.
so I would say it would be a voting member rather than a liaison.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. A voting member rather than a liaison, because that's what's listed here on the committee charge.
Okay.
So you have an opportunity to suggest someone.
So that's a seat that has always existed and it's just been brought to our attention, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Any interest among those present in serving on the Water Supply Protection Committee?
It says a knowledge of geosciences is desirable. I don't even know what geoscience. There's also no date on this letter, but the dates on it are dated '07 at the bottom.
It's
so
just from the town.
I think that's one of
This
the
is just
forms.
a historic document.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, not historically significant, but
Committee charge.
it's an old letter.
The committee was formed in that
I see.
time
Okay.
frame.
It's not a new request.
Correct.
Okay.
Geoscience is stuff you put under paving.
Excuse me.
Chris.
I would say it's a new request in the sense that we received an email from the town engineer alerting us to the fact that a planning board member is one of the required members for this committee. So I didn't provide you with that email, I just provided you with this document, and this is back up to the town engineer's email.
Rob?
I'm not volunteering, I just have a couple questions. One is, first of all, it says voting members may include, so I don't know that it's a requirement. I think we have the opportunity to suggest somebody. And so my question would be, can we appoint or or nominate someone to represent us as we do on the DRB? Or should it be one of us if we do that? And secondly is, do we know how often this committee meets and what, how active it is, what its work is, other than what it says in the charge?
I don't have the answers to the second half of that question. I
don't
don't
have-
suppose you
no.
have any. My understanding is that they've not been exceptionally active, active at all.
So you might want to give me questions that you have about this, and I can ask the DPW and then get back to you at your next meeting.
Sure.
I thought those were good questions. The frequency of the meeting is always important, and I think you were saying, Rob, when it says, and in the may, doesn't mean must have, but can the planning board rep be a rep and not someone currently sitting on the planning board? Like if we knew somebody who had a geosciences background.
Right, or someone who had
And they
particular
had some
interest in
interest
water
in-
supply issues.
Yeah.
That come back, and report to us every so often.
Right, when there was something of relevance. I think that's a great idea.
So
And a
that,
good question.
So I think that that's not necessarily a question that the town engineer or the DPW is going to be equipped to answer. I think we could almost answer it ourselves, and I think the answer is going to be yes, that given the way the charge is structured, that probably would be valid, just as we do with DRB. Rob?
So can I ask if anyone's watching and has an interest in water supply and is willing to represent us and report to us occasionally, to let us know?
The phones are going to be ringing off the hook because we have so many
Operators are
viewers.
standing by.
Standing by.
And we are kind of shorthanded here tonight, too. We have two other members, and I believe we have a newly appointed member who will be joining us soon, so maybe it's a geoscientist.
Do you know who it is?
I don't know her personally, no.
Can we
I
nominate her?
have my suspicions, but I haven't heard anything for a fact, so I better not say anything. Someone may have watched the select board meeting last night
Oh.
and have further information, but I did not watch it, and I haven't gotten any correspondence.
All right.
Player to be named later.
PVPC Top 10 Resolves for 2012. We got in our packet materials. Although I don't have them in front of me here. Anything of specific note in the PVPC's New Year's resolutions? Mr. Schreiber?
So the PVPC met in December, and as part of their December meetings, they have the New Year's resolutions for the upcoming year. So these were presented to the commission at that time, and as they are before you. So I read through it, and of course noted that our efforts to get the New England Central Railroad onto their radar screen had not been successful in terms of the resolutions. So I asked that at the time that resolve number 7 be modified to mention Palmer as part of the inland route, Palmer being in the service area of the PVPC, and that then language similar to what we asked for last year be included. But that motion did not pass at the time. So subsequently, I sent an email, well, really at the suggestion of the chair, I sent an email with that proposed language, and got an email back from Tim Brennan, the executive director, that you all have before you, that says, we'll take up all the suggested changes, including your recommended addition to Resolve 7 at the Planning Commission's February 9th meeting. But I'll likely need to edit your suggested wording a bit so that we can hold resolves to one page. And I'll need to work on that task prior to the commission's February meeting. So at least there is some promise there that it wasn't 9, no, never. But I think it might be helpful if this planning board, last year we voted to support similar language. So I think it would be helpful to do that. So I'm referring to an email that has Chris Brestrup at the top of it.
Do you all
Steve,
have that email?
are you asking that we This language
Exactly.
or all of the
Yeah,
points?
the language, really what I was proposing is that
Your resolve?
number 7, which deals with development of railway in the Pioneer Valley. Actually, there's 2 of them that deal with the railroad.
Have it.
Yeah, I have that.
Yeah, I was just,
Yeah,
thank you, Chris.
yeah. So really, the part in quotations is what I
Okay.
was proposing. And that's pretty much verbatim from what we did last year.
So would you like to make a motion to that effect?
So well, let's see, what do I want? I would move that the planning board support a letter to the PVPC asking that resolve number 7 be modified to include the language in quotations on the bottom of the email exchange between me and Tim Brennan on December 20th.
Should you read that so that people could hear it or not?
Do you want me to read it in? Okay. And that modification says, "The PVPC shall advocate for study and improvement of the north-south corridor of the central corridor along the New England Central Railroad line for both significant upgrading of freight capacity under the priorities of the Massachusetts Freight and Rail Improvement Plan and for new passenger rail service and connections between significant population and educational centers in Vermont, Western Massachusetts, and central southern Connecticut."
I second the motion.
Further discussion? Rob?
Could we ask that this, if this communication is made to the PVPC, that you also specifically communicate it to whoever Palmer's representative is, so that they can also?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Rob, could you say that again? What?
So we've made a motion to send a communication to the PVPC. I'm asking Steve to also send it specifically to the Palmer representative, so that they can also support our.
Oh, I see.
That's perfect.
May I ask a question?
You certainly may.
Who would write this letter? Would Steve write it, or would the chairperson write it, or would the planning staff write it?
I would suggest Mr. Schreiber.
Write the letter on behalf of the planning board?
Sure.
Okay.
If we vote to support it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the letter is essentially going to say
Yeah.
that the board voted to support this, right?
Yeah.
Further comments? All in favor of the motion to support Mr. Schreiber's proposed revisions or additions to item number 7 of the PVPC's 2012 resolves? Opposed? Abstentions? That's a 5-0 vote with 1 abstention.
Thanks.
By way of explaining the abstention, I think this may be a good idea, but I don't want to vote against studying this sort of thing, but my own priorities would be more regional for the PVPC to study regional public transportation plans, which would have a greater impact and a more short-term impact and a more quick-hitting impact on immediate transportation needs in the valley. I personally don't have a lot of hope that this railroad line is going to have that impact.
Point well taken.
Okay. Upcoming planning board schedule. Anything of note that we need to be concerned with, Chris? So our upcoming schedule is as usual. My understanding is for at least January and February, we have an upcoming meeting on the 18th of January, and then we would have meetings in February on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays.
And that would be the 1st of February and the 15th of February.
It would, yes.
Mr.
Sandy.
Co-Chair, or Vice Chair, I just want to note that I unfortunately will have to miss the first meeting in February. I will be away. The date is the 1st, is it?
Yes, it is the
Okay,
1st.
I will be, don't ask where I'll be, but I'll be absent.
That's acceptable as long as you send us postcards. and
Postcard.
From Florida.
Souvenirs.
Send us postcards from Florida.
It's the high seas.
Oh. Nice. So Florida's just the launching place.
just the launching place.
And I'll remind you that our meetings are actually streamed online on the internet, so you will, provided you have internet access on your vehicle, you'll have the opportunity to watch us, and we expect that you'll do so.
I would make a point of that, yeah, be interesting.
All right, anything else?
Along those lines, isn't there actually a mechanism that you can go through to get accredited to participate in the meetings from,
Yeah, that's a good point. The,
you might want to check with town
I think I'm
council.
changing my travel plans. I think I'll be in, South Hadley or something. No, I will not be
Stephen.
here.
well, there was that Attorney General ruling.
Yes,
that-
there,
Yeah, right.
But does that have, the select board have to enable us? Or
yeah,
how?
I believe there's a couple more steps that need to
Yeah.
happen before you can't just suddenly start
Yeah, right.
participating. I think it has to be voted on by the select board for a particular board. I could be wrong in the details of that.
Right, but
Well,
we're sure that Sandra will take care of
I
that.
thank you all for that information, but since imminently we might have a ninth member of our planning board, a quorum should not be a problem.
Well, we just wouldn't want to deprive you of the joy.
Just make sure there's enough parking spaces.
All right, anything else under new business, Chris?
Under, going back to PVPC top 10 resolves, there's something related to that, which I thought you could take up under topics not reasonably anticipated. And that is a request or an invitation by PVPC. I think I sent you an email about this, but I'm not sure I actually distributed the letter, did I?
Yes, it's in our pack. I think it's on our desk.
Yes. Yeah, I've got it, yeah.
PVPC has gotten back to us saying that they do have some resources available to help towns and cities, and that they are inviting us to submit a proposal or a request for help from them. Jonathan spoke with Jessica Allen of PVPC, and apparently the help is in the form of about 15 hours, technical help, 15 hours. So we have to take that into consideration when we think about what they might be able to help us with. I did give you a copy of your recent communication with PVPC regarding the things that you thought we might be able to use help with. Among them were transfer of development rights or farmland preservation bylaws and ordinances, bylaws and ordinances to promote green buildings, solar or wind power, and then there was a category of other Valley Vision strategy, and you put facilitation with development of town transportation plan. And Ms. Allen's communication with Jonathan indicated that the help with the transportation plan probably will take up more than the 15 hours, so she suggested that that probably wasn't a good choice for you to make a request. But the other two, the transfer of development rights and bylaws or ordinances to promote green building, solar or wind power, might be good choices for you to request help on. Jonathan and I discussed this briefly, and we wanted to make the suggestion that if you were to request help on these two items, that you might, that the zoning subcommittee might be the appropriate body to work with PVPC on these two issues. So I guess my question to you is, the requests are due at the end of January. You have one more meeting between now and then, so you could tell me now what you think might be an appropriate request, or wait until the 18th and tell me at that time, and then we can submit something.
Stephen?
I'm just trying to correlate all of this, because, so we made this request, in December, but then I'm trying to figure out the correlation between this letter and this request and this request.
My understanding is that the letter that they wrote back to us was probably based on all of the requests that they received from towns throughout their region. So this is sort of a generic invitation that if you wanted to kind of plug your particular request into this generic invitation, you'd be able to. But it doesn't, I don't think, particularly address the two issues that you asked about.
Because it occurs to me, we got a letter back from them saying that they were only going to fund so are we one of the three that were funded, or is that?
No, I think they're asking for proposals at this point.
I see.
At which point they will pick which ones they're going
I
to
see.
fund. Is that Does that
That's
sound
my
reasonable? Yeah.
understanding, yes.
Oh, so it's not necessarily that we would actually get it? Okay.
Rob?
And do we have to make a detailed proposal saying we want you to help us with this, accomplishing these deliverables or whatever, and we anticipate it would take so many hours or
I would think so, but you could give me a general idea of what it is you think you might want help with, and then the planning staff could draft something, and we could bring it back to you at the January 18th meeting.
So I would suggest of the items that we initially laid out, that TDR, transfer of development rights, is probably of the most actionable right now, because that is something that we're discussing in the context of looking at village center rezoning as a tool to use there. So the green buildings and solar energy is of interest also, but I'm not sure that we would be able to put together anything specific in terms of a request for assistance in the kind of time frame we're talking about. So TDR seems to me to be more relevant. I see nodding heads up and down the board. So I guess we would put that to you and Jonathan, Chris, to think about and maybe inform us at our next meeting what we might be able to do with 15 hours from the PVPC on the topic of TDR.
Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Could we also include the wording in the downtown area too, as well as the village centers, if we are that particular?
Sure. Okay, anything else on that?
No.
I have a topic under topics not reasonably anticipated when it's time for that, but
I
not that
thi-
topic.
We're right there.
Okay. I attended the master planning presentation. Rob was there, and Chris was there last month at the university. And it was a very interesting presentation, and had a pretty good turnout, and quite a few, residents. There were, of course, a lot of UMass planning types there, but my recommendation, without going through all the details, that we ask I think he's the associate planner, he might be an assistant planner, I'm not sure, but to come to this group, to the planning board, and make that presentation to us, so that we could question directly, so that, as many as possible, the full board can be there, because it has implications, the boundaries of their master plan, just, and the residents, it would be an open meeting, so the residents might also be here, they also had concerns, but I found it fascinating, but I also thought that this group might want to have its own presentation. It was a slideshow. It goes very quick. Well, I can't say it goes very quickly. I mean, Rob can attest to that, but the gentleman who presented it did a very nice job and had a lot of maps, overlays, and historic, this is the way it was, this is how it is now, here's how it should be. And I think it's just, a huge issue for us. We are the planning board, and that's their master plan, so, it might take, the better part of a meeting, if we, it might be the primary agenda item, so as to not, compromise anybody else on the agenda, but that would be another call, so that's my spiel.
Is that a motion?
Just a discussion, but I can make a motion that I would make it in the form of a motion that we invite the UMass Planning folks here to present their new master plan to the planning board in the near future.
I would second that.
Further discussion? I'll put in a plug for the master plan on their website. They have a nice website at the university, including a really cool interactive map that shows all the stuff that they're considering on campus, and it's really interesting and easy to work with, so definitely check it out. All in favor of Sandy's motion to invite whoever the relevant person would be from the UMass Planning Department into a future meeting?
Dennis Swinford is the,
All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? That's a 6-0 vote in favor. And the schedule for that, presumably, we can work with whatever is reasonable for the UMass folks.
Yes, and I'd
Yeah.
like it to not be the
February
week I'll
1st.
be away.
but there's no prime time like the present either, because they're hoping to adopt. Yeah.
Okay.
May I
Chris?
say one more thing under the topic of topics not reasonably anticipated?
Yes.
Which is that you did receive a document on major accomplishments of Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and you may want to look at that to see what it is that they do outside of interacting with us.
All right, next item, Form A&R subdivision applications.
I do have a Form A application, and it's for property on Potwine Lane. And the property is currently in the RO zoning district. And the town engineer has taken a look at this, and he finds that it meets the zoning bylaw. And it's located on the south side of Potwine Lane. It's part of a property that's currently 59 Potwine Lane. So what is being requested is that a piece of land be cut off that has a house existing on it. And the requirement in the RO zoning district is 30,000 square feet, and this would be 1 acre, so it exceeds 30,000 square feet. And the frontage is appropriate for the RO zoning district, so it's really just dividing this large lot into 2 lots, okay?
Can I take, I'm sorry, Chris, can I?
You want to-
Yeah.
Mr. Shea is the owner.
Oh, is that,
Do you know
I-
the property this is?
yeah. Cool, okay, thanks.
For some reason, applicants have been giving us lots and lots of plans to sign, but so.
Can I sign these at the end? It doesn't have to be during the meeting, right?
You can certainly sign it at the end.
Okay.
As long as I remember to have you do that.
All right, any upcoming ZBA applications of note?
There is a ZBA application, and it is for the Lit Restaurant and Bar that's out here in Boltwood Walk. They would like to establish seasonal outdoor dining on the patio area outside, and they are coming before the zoning board in order to do that. Is that something that you would like to have an opportunity to review?
Not seeing any nodding heads.
Could you spell that? Is it L-I-T?
LIT.
Lit.
Apparently, it stands for love it if you do texting, which I don't do, but that's what I've been told.
Half lit
That's what I was thinking.
or down lit?
All right, any other special permit site plan review applications coming up
Yeah.
that we should be aware of?
None that I know of.
All right, subcommittee reports. When I'm running the meeting, this is when I get to have my hour-long
Oh, yeah,
discussion with the zoning subcommittee. So we actually don't have much to report from zoning subcommittee of note. This evening, we had our semi-annual zoning forum where we invite members of the community to come in and tell us what their priorities are for zoning. Most of what we heard was about North and South Amherst Village Center rezoning. You won't be surprised to learn. So that was not really a substantive discussion, just a feedback session for people to give us what their thoughts were. At our next meeting, which will be 2 weeks from today on the 18th, will be our first in-depth look at Village Center rezoning for Springtown meeting. So we're billing that as a sort of a roundtable discussion, a solicitation of specific ideas that people have, because people have raised lots of creative ideas for what they would like to see. So we're trying to focus on giving people the opportunity to contribute to the zoning proposal and to actively solicit what their positive ideas are. So that'll be at our next meeting. Questions or comments? Richard?
Did I see some reference in the newspaper that development modifications might rise its head up again?
Development modifications is on our list of priority work items, but given our schedule for the spring, my feeling is that it would be unlikely that we're going to get to it this spring, possibly in the fall. So it is still on halfway between the front burner and the back burner, but it's not moving forward actively enough to make it a likely candidate for the spring.
One of the things I've been thinking about is in raising all of these issues about form-based code zoning, it almost seems like that trumps development modification, and that perhaps it's not necessary, or not necessary to do it in the same way that it was being done, perhaps? Or that those two things can be amalgamated?
Perhaps. I wouldn't characterize it as trumping as much as sharing some overlapping areas of concern. Development modifications was all about trying to provide incentives for practices the town wants to encourage and disincentives for things that it doesn't want to encourage. And form-based code is also, in many ways, about creating requirements for building patterns and things that the town wants to encourage. So there's a fair amount of overlap, but there's also some areas that are not necessarily overlapping.
Yeah.
One of the biggest differences being that form-based code, as we proposed it in the fall, would be obviously particular to specific areas and not something that would be generally applicable townwide, as opposed to development modification, as we considered it originally, would have been something that was broader in its scope.
Right, right. That's one of the things that, I don't mean to be talking myself back onto this committee, but it's one of the things I was thinking about, that the whole development modification document can be changed so that for village centers, form-based code would apply. Meanwhile, in these other areas, there are these other concerns.
That's an interesting approach.
One other minor detail regarding development modifications coming out of today's presentation. Perhaps the bird-friendly windows issue can be integrated into that.
Into form-based, so.
Well, I was thinking into development modifications. For example, in commercial districts, if we revised it so it wasn't going to apply to commercial districts, but in certain areas, consideration along a positive way, can be given to a project that incorporates bird-friendly windows.
And when we originally looked at it, there was a category that involved that type of sustainable development pattern, so that would fit well in there, I think, yeah. Stephen?
Well, I think for sure that form-based zoning, at least some mention of, or some consideration of that presentation, I think would be very useful. Because really that is a tool then that the planning board can use to evaluate this.
And so the only other thing I would do is remind you all, members who are not on the subcommittee, that the solicitation for ideas and feedback on zoning applies to members of the board as well. So I know in particular, Richard, you had some feedback on transportation issues. So if you wanted to come to that meeting in 2 weeks, you're welcome to, or if you wanted to provide us written feedback with specific ideas or thoughts that you'd like to have included in there, we'd be happy to take that into consideration from you or from anybody else on the board. That's all. All right. Committee and liaison reports. PVPC, anything else to report from
Oh, yeah.
Regional Planning Agency?
Now that you have the floor, I can take my full hour then. So PVPC met just a couple weeks ago. We got really the main event was a report on this HUD grant that's shared between this part of Massachusetts and Connecticut. Basically, the Hartford Metro Planning Area plus Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is doing a massive study of that corridor, really the two regions together, for sustainable futures. So we got an update report on this multi-year project. But one of the issues that we talked about beyond that was this continuing effort to get zoning reform in Massachusetts. And so I'm sorry, I'm talking without notes, but one of them has more likelihood of actually making it into the legislative debate in this legislative season. So Tim Brennan was wondering if there are any planning board members who would be willing to basically testify on some of the specifics of what that is. So this is a very broad bill that includes zoning reform on different levels. But some of the ones that really have piqued people's interest is really a modification of the ANR process. And then the other one that certainly piqued my interest was a change of state law that would no longer, I think that there's a requirement that there be a 2/3 majority to approve any kind of a zoning change. So that would be modified to only require a majority vote, so either of city council or of town meeting, depending on your form of government. So here's what I'm not clear about, that if it would be simply enable towns and cities to have a lower threshold, or if it would require towns and cities to have that lower threshold. So I said that I would bring that back. Well, we all said that we'd bring that back to our local boards to see if anyone's willing to testify.
Well, if it has to do with zoning, we have a resident expert, or using the word in a sentence, is Jonathan. But I don't, I'm not sure I understand enough of what you're testifying to whom. To this-
Really to legislative hearings about, in my town, if, this A&R process were modified, these are the issues that came before our town. There's all kinds of horror stories about A&Rs that are approved for, sort of wacky sites. None here in Amherst, but then the other one would be something like the majority versus 2/3. Like, certainly what got my head clicking would be, what could our town look like if the majority vote were in place rather than a 2/3 majority? Well, we would have, people vote in funny ways, but we would possibly have form-based zoning if that existed.
And development modification.
And development modifications.
So, did you have more?
That's it.
Okay. I find, I take a great deal of interest in that legislation as it wends its way through the process, but I don't think that I have enough knowledge and experience with the state enabling legislation to be of use to them in their consideration of the proposal. So I guess I wouldn't want to jump into that fray. Others might.
Hey,
Everyone's looking at their shoes.
The 2/3 issue, I mean, it's sort of an interesting thought exercise.
Yeah.
I imagine if it were sort of a local option thing, I find it hard to believe that the state would just change the required majority sort of through a blanket state act. But I could see them creating a local option to adopt that. I have a harder time seeing Amherst deciding to
Yeah, right.
pursue that option. but-
7/8 majority to approve it, I'm sure.
And anything could happen, right? Chris?
I think the way they're proposing it is that they would have a default at the majority level, and then towns would be able to increase it to 2/3 if they chose to do so. That's my understanding of it.
So every city and town would be reset if this were,
Would be reset at the majority level, and then could choose to go with 2/3 if they wanted to.
Would that require a 2/3 vote?
Would have to vote to, yeah.
Interesting. Definitely something to keep an eye on. And so we're expecting action on that this year, perhaps?
yeah.
Up or down vote?
Yeah. That's what his sense was, that this is a good year for that.
Thank you.
So, yeah. I wonder if someone from the select, we should pose the same question to or I could pose the same question to the select board to see if anyone is willing.
Mhm.
that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, CPAC.
CPAC, at the last meeting, I opted to go to the UMass Master Planning presentation. It was exactly the same time. So I missed it, and the next meeting is tomorrow. So at our next meeting, I'll have a much better report. Basically, they're just starting to schedule, looking at the proposals. Nothing's really happened, they're just coming in. And there's a deadline, but history tells me the deadline's not so firm.
Thank you. AgCom,
David.
that's David. Transportation Plan Task Force.
I've heard nothing about this, have you?
No,
It might be time for staff to sort of contact town manager. Maybe you know something, I don't know.
Chris?
I have seen a document floating around that is a charge for the task force, and it came through our office, and I think Jonathan made some suggestions as to rewording it. So I believe he's been working with the town manager on establishing a charge, and then the town manager will carry through on the appointments. I'm not actually sure if the appointments are by the select board or the town manager. I think they're the town manager with the approval of the select board, but the town manager would be bringing it to the select board. So
And
it's
who
in the
has-
works.
Who has authority for authorizing the charge? The select board?
I think so.
Probably the select board.
I've only seen them come through town meeting so far, I don't know. I suspect there must be some authorized by the select board.
All right, our ARA rep is not here. Design Review Board, who is that?
Don't have anyone.
Don't have anyone. All right.
Oh, it's 2012. So the people that said wait till 2012,
can
I'm
get
going to start bugging you again.
Okay, report of the chair. Acting chair has nothing to report. Staff have anything useful to tell us?
No, I do not.
Then there is only one item left on our agenda. Is there a motion under item 12?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? All in favor of ending this meeting at 8:29 PM, please raise your hands.
Got 8:25. That means we have to sit here for 4 more minutes?
Yeah, no, my clock on the wall says 8:29.
I have a question. Chris, should we hold on to the Montessori school materials so you don't have to?
Yes, that would be a good idea. Yep.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, John.